This video contains spoilers for God of War Ragnarok. If you haven't finished your second story visit to Svartalfheim, then totally come back later. You still here? Because yes, during that part of the game you of course unlock the amazing Draupnir spear as your third weapon. You probably already figured out that it's a very strong addition to your arsenal, but I bet you didn't know about a lot of the hidden mechanics that the game doesn't tell you about. So let's go in depth on all these secret features in this video. If you've been enjoying God of War Ragnarok and the content here on the channel, then totally leave a like to show your support, subscribe for way more videos like this one, and let's go. So when you first unlock the Draupnir spear, there's still some skills locked behind higher upgrade tiers, but you already have access to the two main mechanics of the weapon, impaling spears and siphoning elements. Using both of these features to your advantage will really improve your damage, so before we touch on some of the hidden features I mentioned, let's go over the basics first, starting with impaling spears. Because the Draupnir spear can of course multiply itself, you can stick copies of it in enemies or objects and then use triangle to detonate them for a damaging explosion. The easiest way to do this is with your R1 ranged attack and stuffing your enemy like a pincushion, but there are actually other ways to impale spears into enemies as well. Some runic attacks do this, like the Thrust of 1,000 Soldiers, one of my favorites, or the Heavy Artillery of the Ancients attack showers the field with spears you are also able to detonate. And if you want to know how to get these runic attacks, we made a video on all runic attacks in the game and how to get them, so I'll leave a link to that in the video description. You can also upgrade your R1 sprint attack Hoplite Lunge to impale a spear into an enemy when it hits, which is a very nice way to open any fight. And if you have a bigger window to hit an enemy, the charged R1 attack impaling thrust can stick up to 3 spears in an enemy if you unlock its final skill tier. This will require you to upgrade the Draupnir spear at least once, and I will tell you where to find the materials for that later in the video. Because now that you know how to quickly impale spears into an enemy, it is time to make sure that they do max damage. The normal skill bound to triangle, called Draupnir Skull, is very quick and allows you to easily detonate spears. But the charged variant performed by holding the button, Draupnir's Will, causes your impaled spears to deal significantly more damage. So I'd say it's always worth it to go for the more powerful version, as the increase in damage is really noticeable. I also didn't read this at first, but you can actually perform a quick version of Draupnir's Will if you press triangle right after an attack. The timing on it can be a bit tricky, but what the game doesn't tell you is that there is a small vibration in the controller that tells you exactly when to press the button. So now you can detonate your spears for maximum effect in the middle of a combo, something that becomes even more powerful if you upgrade your spear to unlock all skills, which will have each spear trigger a second explosion as well as increase the limit of spears you can stick into an enemy. So this impaling and detonating mechanic is really cool and powerful, but it's actually the second unique mechanic of the Draupnir spear that makes it the most versatile weapon in Kratos' arsenal. That mechanic of course being the ability to siphon elements. By holding R2, you perform an attack that imbues your current spear with an elemental effect. The type of element depends on the enemy you are attacking, which means you are able to use status effects you normally wouldn't be able to apply without special equipment like shock, bifrost, or poison. You can even upgrade the ability to also grant you a short window of resistance to any element you leech, but while that buff only lasts for 10 seconds, your elemental spears last pretty much indefinitely. I say pretty much, as it actually took a bit of testing to figure out what makes an element on your spear disappear. The skill description only mentions that an element fades after a runic attack or after combat ends, but there is more to it than the game tells you. You see, the element only applies to your current spear, which means that any attack or animation that has Kratos summon a new Draupnir spear removes your currently imbued element. So obviously, impaling a spear into an enemy with either a ranged or melee attack removes the element, which can be countered in part by disabling the skill upgrade that causes Hoplite Lunge to impale an enemy with a spear. But what I also found is that an R3 finisher animation causes Kratos to also summon a new spear, and so it also means you lose your current element. The same is by the way true for the Wrath Spartan Rage ability. However, switching weapons does not remove your element, so you can start a Muspelheim challenge, drain any element you like with the spear, and then use that for the rest of the encounter while alternating with your axe and blades. You can even stack an elemental effect with Violent Maelstrom, which is the spear's version of the consumable weapon buff like Permafrost and Immolation punctuation that you can see build up in the circle next to your health and rage. Violent Maelstrom increases the stun damage of each attack, and while performing a stun finisher will make you lose your siphoned element, you can of course always switch to a different weapon for the execution if you have an element on the spear that you really like. And actually, throwing an elementally charged spear can also be very useful. When stuck in a target, detonating these spears will build up a lot of elemental energy on an enemy or even a boss. So while you can keep the element on your spear and build it up with melee attacks, you can also single out a target, stick them with the spear and detonate it to pretty much instantly trigger an element on them. How much buildup you do is not affected by if you use Leviathan Skull or Whale to detonate the spear, so this is one of the few cases where the shorter, less powerful detonation is actually better. You can also discharge the element on the spear with the R2 ranged attack Gale Force, but this does way less elemental damage and therefore isn't really worth it in my opinion. So thanks to the unique and sometimes even hidden mechanics of the spear, it is a really versatile and powerful weapon, and there are even more powerful melee attacks, combos and even ranged attacks you can perform. The Draupnir spear is actually a really strong ranged weapon, not only because you can deal massive damage with all the impaled spears, but also because it offers you a huge amount of crowd control. You can push enemies back, you can draw them towards you, or you can blast them away with a massive gust of wind. It's effectively the best of both worlds, as it has more crowd control than the Leviathan axe, but it is not hindered by a shorter attack range like the blades. With the spear at upgrade level 7, you can really go to town, as the final upgrade in the technique tree allows you to start throwing spears quicker if you toss them back to back. If this is a playstyle that seems like fun to you, then check out our ranged Kratos build for an armor set and more items that will make this playstyle even more powerful. We'll link to that one in the video description. But the spear is also a very strong melee weapon, and let's be honest, it is also incredibly badass to see Kratos the Spartan finally fighting with the spear, truly bringing him back to his roots. The selection of attacks here is very similar to your other two weapons, so there are attacks that chain out of a sprint or attacks that trigger when you first dodge in a specific direction. Like the blades and the axe, the light combo that ends with a unique heavy finisher is very strong here, especially when upgraded, as it also summons these whirlwinds that damage and interrupt enemies. And like I mentioned earlier, even in melee combat you have attacks to quickly impale spears in an enemy and detonate them to increase your damage. In general, the Draupnir spear is a weapon with a great attack range, and it's pretty quick too, even with the wide sweeps from the heavy combo. My preferred way of using it in melee is to build up Maelstrom as quickly as possible, then consume the buff when the meter is filled to build up stun on enemies really quickly. Which is already a strong playstyle by itself, but can be made even better if you also equip one of my favorite weapon attachments for the spear, the Hind of Weightless Recovery, which can be bought at the blacksmith after completing the Creatures of Prophecy main story mission. With this attachment equipped, any successful hit when the Maelstrom gauge is full has a chance to give you a blessing of cooldown, so then all your currently running cooldowns are cut short by a bit. The best thing is that when you trigger Violent Maelstrom, so consume the full charge, the game will still count the bar as full, meaning you can also trigger the blessing of cooldown with this powerful stun damage buff active on your weapon. And if you get lucky, because it is of course a chance to trigger, you can cut the long cooldowns on some powerful relics or runic attacks short to use them much more often. Now, we've mentioned you'll need to upgrade the Draupnir spear to unlock some specific skills a couple of times now. And because you get it pretty late into the game, you only get one of the upgrade materials you need for the spear from playing the main story. For the rest of these Gale Flames, you need to engage in some of the optional content of the game. One of them drops from a Berserker pair in Svartalfheim, Bodvar and Starolfr, who are located in the mines area of the realm. Another one can be found from the boss at the end of the Nocturnal Predators quest in Vanaheim, which starts in the crater area at nighttime by investigating these wisps that are harassing some of the wildlife. We've made videos for both of those bosses, so again, check the video description for links if you need more information on either. I'll also leave a link to a guide for all the Lindworm locations in the game, as that's what you'll need to collect your final Gale Flame, although you can of course do these in any order you want. Just remember to grab your reward from the Yggdrasil Rift after you trap the Lindworm, otherwise you don't get the Gale Spark you need to get the upgrade material. If you have any more nice tips or tricks for the Draupnir spear, be sure to let us know in the comments. Subscribe for way more God of War Ragnarok videos, leave a like if you enjoyed this one, and if you want, you can watch our previous video on where the series will go after Ragnarok by clicking on the screen. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.